Hey there, and welcome to AWS On Air, and we've got a special guest with us. We've got Carlos from Canonical. I'm Ann Gravelli, one of your hosts, solution architect here at AWS, joined by one of my wonderful co-hosts, Jillian. Jillian, please introduce yourself to everyone.
Oh, Am, thank you for calling me wonderful.
Always you are.
Well, my name is Jillian Ford, and I am a solutions architect where I work with startups.
And Carlos, tell us, from Canonical, what do you do at Canonical?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here. What I'm doing in Canonical is very interesting. I am in charge of making Ubuntu awesome on AWS.
All right. So we're jumping right in. If you didn't know already, one of Canonical's biggest products, I would say, just me saying my opinion, is Ubuntu, right? Ubuntu's been around for a while, and I see it everywhere, right? But you've got a lot of choices out there for Unix-like OSs. What makes Ubuntu different than all those other choices?
That's an excellent question. Let me tell you a little story. When I was at the university back in 2004, I was already a Linux geek. I love Linux, but I know that it was super complicated, let's say, because you needed to configure, monitor your sound. It was super frustrating.
Drivers, right?
Drivers. Yeah.
Always the driver.
Exactly. And the thing is when Ubuntu was launched, I tried this new distro. I was like, okay, let's give it a try. And it was really an interesting experience because it just booted up, desktop monitor with the right resolution, refresh rate, and all those technical stuff. And even with sound, you had a startup sound. So it was, back at that time, was, wow, this is tremendous. This is a huge effort behind it. And I think that one of the things that developers like is that this thing works. I mean, it lets you to run the freedom of Linux, and it works. It is maintained. It is supported. So this is one of the first thing that comes to my mind when you ask me why this is preferred by people. But the second big element, and I think that is even more important, is the community behind, because the community makes the Linux distribution supported, because you will find tutorials, documentations, videos, people interacting in forums, in question and answers, platforms. And also is the community who is building the third-party open source repository behind Ubuntu. So Canonical takes that from Debian and adds a couple of packages, and then there you go, ready for production, supported, and so on. So I think that those two are the strongest elements that make Ubuntu what it is today.
I think so many people who are watching this can relate. Like, they're like, if it works, I'm using it. That's that's like the number one criteria, right?
Pretty much.
So for the companies that are currently using Ubuntu, or maybe thinking about it, what do you think that they should be really considering as part of using Ubuntu? Okay,
so one of the first things that comes to my mind is that in the past, let's talk about the past. When somebody talked about Ubuntu, they said, okay, this is free, this is great, but it's not for companies. Why? Because I have this paid operating system, Windows, other Linux distribution, but if it's paid, it's supported, and this is free. So I don't like it much. And I saw many times in my previous jobs, I saw people trying to deploy solutions based totally on free open source software based on Ubuntu or other distribution, and then central IT struggling to get it working on production. Wow. Because, of course, it was not running on Windows or any other specific Linux distribution. And I've seen this even recently with machine learning models, where you have the data scientists working on Ubuntu, and they have a machine learning model they want to deploy, and central IT gets this problem of trying to get it done. And so one of the things that company could look when we're talking about Ubuntu is that this doesn't have to be like this. We have Ubuntu, free Ubuntu, has this LTS release cycle, where we said, okay, when Ubuntu is released, you have 5 years of supported Ubuntu. Everything is supported on the repository. So you will have the operating system and the platform supported. I'm talking about security patches in the end, because in the end, the companies do care about security. You know, big companies need to have security coverage, in-call support, maintenance, compliance, and so on. So the interesting thing is what happens if this is not enough. You know, you say, okay, this is Ubuntu, it's 5 years supported, but I need more time, I need SLA, I need compliance, for example. Then we say, okay, for those users, we have Ubuntu Pro. Ubuntu Pro is the same Ubuntu that everybody knows. It works the same way, but it has enabled a set of features on top of that. So, for example, you can have you have extended security coverage from 5 years, which is the standard, to 10. Then you have, for example, kernel live patch. So you don't need to, if there is a vulnerability that is affecting your kernel, for example, live patch covers that, and you don't need to reboot immediately. You don't need to update and reboot the machine. So nice. you can wait to your next maintenance window, for example. Also, it comes with FIPS, which is a feature that is for FedRAMP environments. If you need to run for public sector and you need FedRAMP certification, FIPS will help you with that. And it has also automatic script for hardening your server against DISA or CIS, for example. This is STIG and CIS. And this comes everything bundled in Ubuntu Pro.
You know, Carlos, it's interesting. A lot of these same companies, enterprise grade companies that are concerned with things like compliance and security. One of the big ways that I think they're reducing their footprint to enhance security too is moving away from like long running servers or VMs and moving more towards the containerization space, right? And containerizing their workloads, especially when moving to something like AWS. How's Ubuntu working with containers, and how am I going to experience the OS now that I've moved to a container workload?
Yeah, this is a great question, because we also at Canonical, we think that containers are great and are the next step in the cloud, because it gets you higher on the stack and you don't care about the operating system. We do care about that. But then in the end, the security concerns are the same, because the user has to pick a base container and then put things on top. And those things are mainly open source packages where you don't know its provenance or if they are maintained and so on. And actually, according to a study done by Unit 42 from Palo Alto Networks during last year, they found out that 96% of third-party containers running on the clouds contain known vulnerabilities.
Wow.
And why is that? It's because by architecture, by design, a container is an immutable asset. So once you build it, you put it on the cloud, and then it's not that you will update the container. You have to rebuild it. You know, so it is tricky to keep it up to date. And what do we have for that? What is Ubuntu doing for helping on this area is that we have released Ubuntu LTS containers, which is the same process of supporting 5 years, all the stack that is inside of the machine, for example. Now on the container, we have the same. We have Ubuntu LTS containers, and also we have third-party open source applications as containers. For example, you can get Redis, you can get MySQL, Cassandra, Postgres, for example, as LTS containers out of the box, ready to use.
That's cool.
Yeah, and that Ubuntu LTS containers, is that only in the Pro version that you were talking about earlier?
No, actually, that's a good question, because these LTS containers are for free. They are. You can grab them from the ECR public gallery on AWS and just start building from that.
I was going to jump into that too, actually. You're leading me into my next question very well right there, Carlos. Any tips for somebody who maybe hasn't yet encountered Ubuntu or hasn't deployed anything on Ubuntu in AWS yet? So it sounds like maybe we can start with the ECR public gallery, right? So that's one area where I can go get a bunch of Canonical container images and work with those for free. If it's for free, it's for me. What else? What else would you recommend, Carlos?
Yeah, well, okay, you mentioned it very well. If you're into container world, go to ECR Public Gallery. We have everything there. Same as Docker Hub, we have them published on ECR. But if you are into Pro and you would like to maintain your own server, go to the marketplace, search for Ubuntu Pro. We have Ubuntu Pro there, ready to launch for all the versions from I think even from 4004 Pro, which is still under maintenance by us.
Nice.
But don't go that old, please. Pick a recent version. And we have until 2204. So in AWS, you will always find the latest and greatest Ubuntu, either on marketplace, containers, on even other services like Lightsail, or we have Ubuntu also for EKS if you want to run your worker nodes with those servers too.
Very nice.
Yeah, and for those who are currently using Ubuntu, there's got to be maybe one thing that you've just seen commonly that is like, oh, if only they knew that they should be doing this. What advice would you have?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I would start talking about, I mean, not everybody knows about what LTS means. You know, when we say Ubuntu LTS, we are talking about the long-term support. We are talking about 5 years of support. So if they need to pick a version, try to get an LTS, because then they will get supported. And when we talk about support, we're talking about security patches and then. So if they want to push for production something, go with the LTS version, which is covered. But also, there are other interesting things if you would like to go to Pro, because on Pro you will have services that are super easy to consume. For example, if you need to harden your server using an industry standard as CIS, so you would like to run Ubuntu on CIS hardened profile, for example, you can get it on Pro. So you spin up a Pro machine, and then you run the script with one single line, for example. And those are things that are not known because people tend to believe that Ubuntu Pro is a different product, which is not. It's just the same Ubuntu, but with all of those features already enabled.
I love it. And I think I saw maybe a blog post too about that, about Ubuntu security and enterprise support on AWS as well. So maybe we can link that blog post out as well. Good place to go get started if you want to go harden your servers that are already running on AWS. Carlos, thank you so much for joining us and teaching us all about the offerings Canonical's got with AWS. Jillian, as always, you've been an amazing co-host. Thank you so much for joining.
It's always fun with you, AM.
Oh, yeah. Agreed. Always fun with you, Jillian. All right. Stick around for more from AWS On Air. We will be right back.